All right, everybody. Um, I'm updating the guidance for 135 ACM now that we've received so many of the updates that we have been asking for over the last year plus. So just follow along a little bit as I build a trip from Anchorage to Juneau in a test aircraft to include passenger entry and weight and balance. So let's start here on the overview page. You will see that I am in my late grace. That's what the pink color up here on top means that I am in late grace for my 293B, which is the aircraft check. I don't have an aircraft assigned yet, so this line right here doesn't show me anything, and then this is my duty line. This middle line is for the aircraft status. This last line is for my duty status. Hillsborough weather, you can ignore that. Before I duty on, let's take a look at some of the features here that are worth looking at. This compliance section is awfully nice. It shows what I'm due for. Um, and then the current training records as well shows what I'm due for. If you see anything here in gray, then that means that you are expired in that item. Um, the only time that that won't matter is something like a special approach that maybe you were never authorized for in the first place, or you're able to get recurrent some other way, or you're on your way to sim. But this is a great place to have a look at your currency. And I believe I sent a memo out just a couple months ago about that. So hopefully you guys are looking at that. This section here, though, my time in the last quarter, last few quarters and year, this is a pretty embarrassing number for me. I'm sure all of yours are much higher, but you know, that's what I get for taking the desk job, I suppose. All right, so back to dutying on. So let's look across the bottom, the overview page, the aircraft, and the mission. Let's mention duty history here. They have repaired duty history, at least for Apple, so that now I can select a certain duty period. And if I need to edit it, I actually can. So if I click this box, it will actually allow me to edit that duty period. So I'm not going to in this case. That's just for demonstration. And I'm using my iPad with the mouse just so that you can see where I'm pointing rather than using my finger. All right, we're going to start by dutying on. So I click the duty page. I click Start Duty. I select the time. Of note is that it's already in Zulu. It is 21:48 Zulu right now. So I can either say that I forgot to duty on at 2100, hadn't done it yet, so I'll duty on at 2100, or I could just leave it as now. So I hit done, and as always, I'm not done. I have to click down here, click Start Duty. All right, now I'm on duty, and I'm going to take the aircraft. Let's take this. I assigned myself to airlift. Let's take this LIR 45 test aircraft. So I'll take a look at what maintenance is coming due. It looks like next date is the VOR check in 30 days. That only exists here for this dummy aircraft. And actually, there's a couple things not set up in this aircraft. Let's look at 253 Alpha Lima. Next date, fire bottle inspection is due in 9 days. This inspection on the main landing gear is due in another 1,800 landings. And then we have this life port phase A inspection due in 51.2 hours. And then we have 2,177 start cycles to go. 3,177 landings on the aircraft, 4,017.4 hours on the airframe, and then it says we have 2,900 pounds, 2,907 pounds of fuel on board right now. That may or may not be accurate. Just depends, garbage in, garbage out, right? So let's back to our test. All right, back to our test aircraft. Sorry, I'm not very good at editing, so bear with me here. I'll assign the asset, and I now have it selected. Now I'm going to do a mission. What type of flight is this? That's first and foremost. It is an ambulance trip. And I am the captain in this case, and I'll pick Brent Connor as my co-pilot because Brent's a tanker captain, so there's no way of mistaking this trip for a real trip. Here's my page out number, which is maybe it's 23, it's 2024 now. Dash 1445. I have no idea. I'm making that number up, but that will come from the page. And that is all I need on this first page to get going. And then I'm going to go to the flight tab. And if I'm just going to go, let's say I'm just going to do a single leg for demonstration purposes right now. I'll go ahead and put on here that we're going from Anchorage And notice I have to select anchorage from the list. If I don't, it'll mess things up for accounting. To Juno. And again, I select Juno from the list. I don't just hit accept. And I'm going to have 2 nurses and a patient. I know that's not a typical trip, but let's just do that anyway. And let's start by making the customer airlift. And so the passengers, because I selected airlift, I will get a list of the current airlift nurses on my passenger list. So we will just take Julie and Elise because they're the first 2 on the list. And then we're going to take a patient as well. And the patient's not on the list, so I'm going to take the patient myself, and that is going to be Fred Johnson, who weighs 200 pounds. And I'll hit add, and now I hit accept. So that sounds like 5 of us on board because there are 2 in the front and 3 in the back. All right. And of course, for Fred Johnson there, I probably checked his ID and got his birthday, and we ran him through TSA and all of that stuff. That happened behind the scenes. That might be the topic for another video, but there are plenty of memos out there about TSA handling, which of course matters for this aircraft because it's a Lear 45. Now that I'm here and the nurses are on their way, I'm going to go ahead and run a weight and balance right now. I'm mostly set up with all my stuff, but I'll go ahead and put the patient here on the front med stretcher, and that was Fred. So now Fred's in there. And I'm going to put Julie in this seat, and I'm going to put Elise in this seat. And let's say in the tail compartment, I've already got 136 pounds in there for whatever reason. I know I'm going to add another 40 pounds. So I'll just bump that tail up to 176. And I'm leaving with 4,500 pounds of fuel. I don't know if that's, I don't know this plane that well. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. And I'm going to land with 1,200. This last number, landing fuel, it just doesn't matter. It's not required by the FARs. So if you don't want to put it in there, you don't have to. I don't care. First thing here, all the numbers are green, so I know I'm good. But if I really want to know, here's my current CG, right smack in the middle of the envelope, just above my max landing weight. Here's my landing CG, so I'll be well below my max landing weight down here and still in CG. And then here's my zero fuel weight down here. So that's nice. So I'm going to just go ahead and submit this. Now, I'm right smack in the middle of the CG, so if another person shows up, I'll make sure to list them on the manifest. I know full well that other person isn't going to take me out of CG, but if you wanted to run another one, which technically is legally correct, go ahead and just resubmit it. Now you'll have 2 weight and balances submitted, both correct, both in the right CG. So we've satisfied the rec at that point. So one last chance to make sure I didn't make any mistakes here, and I hit OK. Weight and balance is submitted. Now I know that your CG is listed here in inches, and you guys run in percent Mac for the 45. That's something that we will work on getting changed later. In fact, that might be something that's already available to be changed. I'll take a look later on. But anyway, let's finish running this trip. We can now see that leg 1, the weight and balance is complete. I go up to the flight here, and I'm going to go ahead and enter my times. And every time I click in this box, it's going to show the current time in Zulu. So it is, in fact, 22:01 Zulu right now. So I'll go ahead and set that time. And now I'm pretending, right? If I did this on the taxi or just before I got to the runway and estimated, or I looked at my FMS at the end of the trip or whatever, we'd be a different time. So let's say I actually took off at 22:07. All right, another bad edit on my part, but let's continue here. The point here is when I put my out time in, personally, when I'm flying, what I'll do is I will have the door closed, my seatbelt's on, the people have been briefed, I'm ready to go. I'm just about to run the before start checklist, and I will open up this tab, and I'll roll it forward 3 minutes because that's usually about how long it takes me to get out of the blocks as my out time. My off time and my on time, I will get off of my FMS, and my in time, I just take a glance at my watch to see what time it is when I shut the engines down to get my in time. It's important to get those numbers as accurate as you can, keeping in mind that these numbers are going to get rounded to the nearest 6 minutes anyway. So if you're off by a minute or 90 seconds or even 2 minutes, it really isn't going to make or break anything as long as you're not consistently estimating in the wrong direction. Just do your best to get the times right. The computer's going to round it to the nearest tenth, and we should be good to go from there. So let's say I've landed at this point. I'm pulling this information off my FMS, and I took off at 22:07. That means I landed at 00:30. These are probably bad times. I'm doing bad math because I'm trying to talk and work at the same time. And my in time. That was 00:25 before. I'm going to roll this up to 33. And so I look, and my flight time was 2.3 and my block time was 2.6. Those are terrible times. I'm sorry, but you get the idea. Now, there are some new boxes on here that are new to me: aerial supervision and initial attack. You can ignore those. Those are for tanker. Maybe you want to make some notes in here. Patient cleared by BDR, et cetera, et cetera. The CG, forward CG, aft CG, actual CG, loaded weight, and takeoff weight. If you choose not to use the performance tab and you just want to pull the numbers that you used on your plotter and graph or other approved means of calculating a weight and balance, you could put those numbers in here, and that would suffice the requirement. I think perf is faster and easier because everything's mostly preloaded for me. It grabs my passenger weights. Now again, garbage in, garbage out. As long as I put the right thing in, I'll get the right information. So now I'm good. I am ready to finish up this trip. So I'm going to go back to the core page and make sure everything looks right. All right, so then we have this patient miles section. That's something that gets manually entered. All right, another edit. So I'm going to put my patient miles in. So the patient miles is loaded miles. Those are the miles flown with the patient on board. You have to put something here. So let's say you do a trip and you never pick up the patient because there's a mechanical issue or because patient ended up not taking the flight or whatever the case may be, or maybe you flew. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's say there's nothing. You still have to put a 0 in. Let's say on this trip, it's around 500 miles. Let's say my FMS is telling me that I flew, this is air miles, right? That it tells me I flew 520 miles. I got vectored around a little bit. So 520 miles, I put that in there. Notice that it didn't give me my number of landings, my number of starts. On a multi-leg trip, the app will automatically put these numbers in for you. But because I'm doing this dummy one leg trip, it's not going to give it to me. So I have to do it manually. So I did one start, one landing in this case. Now, was it a night takeoff? Was it a night landing? Landings, this is total landings. So was it a night takeoff and landing? Sure, this one we did at night. Not really, but that's what I'm going to say. Or was it an SIC night takeoff and SIC night landing? So it's nice to put these or an SIC landing. Again, up here this thing is going to assume that all these numbers are for the captain unless you say otherwise. Another place to put that information is who was the pilot flying? Was it me or was it the co-pilot? And a little kind of funky bug of the system is that it just shows you everyone who's on duty now as a possibility for pilot flying. It's kind of silly. So anyway, we're just going to say that I did all these and I'm going to close the trip. I'm going to hit Save Mission. This is my last chance to review it. Disposition completed. Is it? There are other choices for transplant mostly, or canceled standbys, declined, etc. But in this case, we're just going to keep it simple and call it completed. For an ambulance trip, it's always going to be completed. Block time 2.6. Yes. If you see a big giant number in there, you probably made a mistake. Let's say I did see a big giant number in here. I see that the block time was 122,000 hours or some nonsense like that, which happens regularly. That probably means that I left one of these blocks on the flight page either blank or wildly inaccurate. If I have to change one of these, the way to force the app to do the math is to change every single one. So if this one ended up being wrong, I would change it to make it right, but then I'd go back through and accept all of them again to force new math. So we've gone over that before, but that's the best way to force the app. And again, I'm sorry for this hour and 15-minute trip. I got dumb times in here, but again, for demonstration purposes only, right? So anyway, so we've got our landings, our night takeoff, our night landing, and our starts. So I'm tracking my currency. I got my loaded miles. This maintenance out of service time and extended standby times, you don't have to worry about. Those are for tanker. And if I wanted to load my approaches in here or actual instrument time, feel free. Cross-country time and night holds, etc. Hopefully you're keeping a separate logbook and not counting on ACM. I know I'm not. So I'm going to save my mission. The numbers look good, and I fixed this fake error. 2.6, flight time is 2.3 with a start. Here's where I started. Here's where I entered. It all looks good. And I'm going to hit Finish Mission. If I were to suspend the mission, we can talk about that in a different video. But suspend is if you want to pick up the trip later. But in this case, we're just going to finish the mission. It's been finished. I click OK. It kicks me out of the asset, and that trip is complete. And one thing that I almost forgot is dutying off. So I'm going to go back to the duty page now that the mission's over. I'm going to do a hypothetical duty off period here. So normally you guys are dutying off 12 hours later. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's not. So let's say I duty off the next day and I'm picking random numbers here. Let's say I'm dutying off at 1600. That's a bad time. So let's say I'm dutying off at 1300. Let's make it 1200 the next day. And 15 hours. So we see that I went over duty. Okay, that's illegal if I don't say anything. If there's a reason for it, it's legal. If there's not a reason for it, then it's illegal. So I need to give the reason. So inside of this lighter colored box here over the world map, I click and I'll get a cursor. And I'm going to say my part 135 duty ended at 1100 Zulu. Remaining duty was post-flight. So while our duty day went over, the point is I don't want you to just duty off. There's no way for us to give you your 10 hours rest unless we see when you actually dutied off. So even though you weren't actually on 135 duty after 1100 Zulu, those are 91 activities, so to speak. You are allowed to post-flight your airplane and kind of get your act together. We don't want that cutting into your rest, right? So then your duty record, when you duty back on the next day, we're going to want to be able to show that you got your 10 hours rest. And we can't do that if you dutied off at 1100 Zulu, but then stuck around for another hour. Now, transportation, local in nature, separate conversation, but that should be your final task every day in ACM is dutying off. And so not to worry if you forget to duty off and then a couple hours later you remember that you need to. It's just fine to click up here and pick the time that you actually dutied off. This is simply a record of your duty period. Click done. We'll click end duty. Duty time successfully ended. Great. I click OK. And now we are back in business, ready to go do whatever we're going to do during rest and come back and fight the fight the next day. One thing I like to do, and I think it helps the app, is to refresh the app with this refresh button up here after I duty off, and that puts me sort of in a fresh spot the next day. All right, that's the end of the story. Thank you.